All right, we have Greg Cosell. Now, most people would start this thing off asking Greg about quarterbacks because he knows a lot about quarterbacks. All right, well, we're going to go the other way around. You're watching all
Long
these.
snappers.
Nah, well,
No?
we can get to that
Oh,
point.
no,
And
let's not.
we might run out of battery on this
Let's
microphone.
not.
I got other stuff to talk to you. How about when you're watching these passers, who are some good pass rushers that you've seen on tape? Guys getting after these quarterbacks, because we got a head coach who likes pass rushers.
Well, it's interesting. I've developed this little bit of a theory, and I don't know if I'm right or wrong, but, hey, it's my theory, so I like it. I think that interior pass rush pressure has become far more important than it used to be. Not that edge pressure is not important, but for years and years the mantra was edge pressure and great corners on defense. And again, I'm not saying you don't need those two positions, but I think with the changing nature of NFL pass games, a lot more quick game, the ball coming out, quicker drops, I think that interior pass rush pressure has really, really become important in today's NFL. And while there aren't 10 or 20 Aaron Donalds, I think we see the impact that that kind of player can have on NFL passing games.
Interesting. And then it would also stand to reason that guys who can pass protect as interior offensive linemen would also become important players, right?
Right, but I think, again, there's a difference now. We used to look at tackles in particular back in the day and think that they had to pass protect for 2.5 seconds, let's say, which is the length of time in a 7-step drop concept. Now with quicker pass games, I think you can theoretically get by without offensive tackles who are quote-unquote dancing bears and are out on an island by themselves. Look at what the Patriots did this year. They played Trent Brown at left tackle. There are a lot of people who believe Trent Brown wasn't good enough to play right tackle, and here he was the starting left tackle on a Super Bowl winning team. So I think that the game has changed to some degree, and a lot of sort of the bromides that we all would say, the conventional wisdom that we automatically just spit out, I think a lot of that is changing.
How about when you're watching these prospects in this year's class, not necessarily like this guy's the best player at his position or this guy's the third best player, just some guys that you liked watching that you think are good players. Okay. And maybe you can't make an argument that this defensive tackle is better than Ed Oliver, but you just really like this guy for whatever reason.
Well, I really like Jalen Ferguson from Louisiana Tech, who's a defensive end, and could perhaps be an outside linebacker in a base 3-4, but that delineation between base and sub is also something that is kind of melting away, because in the NFL in 2018, 73% of all defensive snaps were in sub. So 3/4 of NFL snaps on defense were in sub. So essentially someone like Jalen Ferguson is a pass rusher. And to me, he was somewhat similar to Marcus Davenport, who came out as a first-round pick. The Saints traded up for him. So I really like Jalen Ferguson. Some other players who stick in my head that I really liked, and we're talking regardless of position now, I really like the corner from Michigan, David Long. Now, David Long lined up at right corner for Michigan, and I think I watched 4 or 5 full games. I don't think there was not one snap where he didn't start out in press. Now, he wasn't playing press man on every single play, but he lined up in press position, I think, on every single snap. And I really, really liked him. I'll say something now that will come across as really controversial, but you know what I do. I just watch the tape. There's a running back from Nebraska named Devine Ozigbo, who's about 230 pounds, about 6 feet. He reminded me stylistically of Todd Gurley. Now, he's not as powerful as Gurley, but I looked at Ozigbo and I thought, that's who this guy reminded me of. And I thought that he could, again, we know about the whole running back deal and the philosophy of teams and the idea that maybe you can get running backs anywhere and there's 10 or 15 different guys who can line up and be good running backs, and maybe there is some truth to that, but I really liked Ozigbo.
I like to ask our GM, Rick Spielman, this every year. I say, every draft class has a different identity or a different look to it. How would you characterize this one? And he immediately went to the depth of this class, and he said, we have more draftable players on the board this year maybe than we've had in a while. Would you agree with that? And then what would be your characterization of this year's class? What's the identity of it?
Well, I would agree with that, and that's what drove me nuts about this, because I felt like there were 100 guys I didn't get to watch who I think are potentially very draftable players. And, you know, I'm a one-person scouting unit, so I can only watch so many guys. But I think this is a big man's draft more than anything. I think O-line and D-line. So, you know, I think there'll be a lot of those players drafted. My guess is teams' boards probably have 8 of the first 10, 11 guys as defensive players. Now, we know it may not play out that way because of quarterbacks, but that would be my guess. So, to me, the defining feature of this draft is it's a big man's draft.
Interesting. And with the 18th pick in the 2019 NFL Draft, the Vikings will select.
Oh, come on. You can't put me on the spot like that.
Come on. Who would look good for Mike Zimmer's team this year?
Oh, God, that's a hard question, because I don't think, you know, I love the process of evaluation. You know, they need offensive linemen. I mean, there's potentially a lot of guys who could be there. You know, it all depends on how they have them rated. You could make the argument based on film that they had the 2 worst starting offensive guards in the NFL last year. So, I mean, you're going to have someone like Chris Lindstrom from Boston College. I really like Dalton Reisner from Kansas State, who played tackle, but some may see him as a guard. And to me, he's a tempo setter. He's one of those nasty competitive guys. So, you know, those are 2 names that, again, I don't know how people have them rated, but I think for a team like the Vikings, they clearly need offensive guards. Yeah. It's going to be tough to do what they want to do, because the reality with Kirk Cousins is that you need a run game. He's a complementary player. You know, people, because of the amount of money he got, thought that he was Johnny Unitas, but he's a complementary player. You need to be able to run. Dalvin Cook, my guess is probably healthy for the first time in 2 or 3 years, and they're going to want to run the ball, and you need guards and offensive linemen to do that.
Yeah, you got a few hours left before the draft. You can go watch more tape if you want.
You know, I think I'm probably done with that. I think my eyeballs are popping out of my head.
Okay, enjoy the draft.
Thanks.